Good afternoon. This is Dr. Ken Long from the Department of Logistics and Resource Operations at U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, and I want to have a short discussion about our department's view of sustainment in ILE curriculum. This is as of academic year 2012. It's May 16th, 2012. I want to start with a consideration of doctrine and or informal practice, and I'm going to borrow some ideas from Krechik, 2011's book, U.S. Army Doctrine, from the American Revolution to the War on Terror. And he does a thorough scholarly job of looking at the Army's history with both of these concepts back from the beginning to the current practice. And he talks about doctrine as being authoritative, approved by authority, and then mandated for use, and contrasts that with informal practice, which has evolved from custom, tradition, experience, or knowledge and use, and shows how it has evolved and socialized through both writing and conversation. So it's more than just what's inside your own experience, but it's that piece of our best practices in the profession that's been socialized through leadership. He demonstrates convincingly that the Army has acknowledged both of these sources of knowledge as being important and useful, and observes the dynamic between those two, that sometimes we've been more of a doctrinal Army and sometimes an informal practice Army. And that is important for us here at CGSC to consider because we're actually at a crossroads between both of those, that we have faculty and students who have rich experiences of war, and we also represent a institution that is designed with a mission statement, a teaching doctrine. So we actually incorporate both of those. If you look at Doctrine 2015 and emerging trends from the professional literature, you'll see that there is, what I see anyway, is a very strong connection now between the worlds of doctrine and the world of informal practice as defined by Krechik. Doctrine 2015 moves from formal statements of timeless principle in FMs and ADPs through implementing instructions down to approved TTPs, in an attempt, I think, to move closer towards the informed best practices that are coming out of the last 10 years of war. And then you have Army organizations like CALL and then the RCAP program at CASCOM, for example, which are institutionalized ways of developing lessons learned but moving them more towards professional knowledge as opposed to listing that which was done. It's not Army history, but it is informed best practice and represents a learning organization's effort to understand its world. You also see that kind of professional knowledge being generated at SustainmentNet on AKO and expressed through opinion articles and research articles in various professional journals. So there is a continuum, in my view, between the world of authoritative, approved, mandated doctrine and best informal practices expressed through professional literature. And we actually see both of those being conducted inside our classroom, where we try to find the best blend of both. We use pseudo-doctrine or emerging doctrine, if you will, to get a leg up on a professional doctrine that perhaps is lagging behind what the field is understanding. And we try to incorporate student insights and faculty insights from their own experience to come up with this best blend, this best trade-off. So we're not just here teaching doctrine. In many cases, the doctrine is out of date, and we're trying to find a way to navigate between both of these types of professional knowledge. Now, thinking about sustainment as part of planning and part of the educational process here, we acknowledge the mission command construct and the warfighting functions of protection, maneuver, fires, intel, and sustainment, all tied together by mission command. And we sort of view this as a building block approach, if we start down on the left, we think before you can get to effective action out here, you have to start with a grounding in doctrine principles. You have to understand the tools that you have available that allow you to turn that doctrine into informed action. You have to gather and understand and integrate facts and assumptions about your mission area and the theater you're going to work in. You have to have an understanding of the units that you're going to support, the kinds of missions they are directed to perform, and which they may be called upon to perform at any time, so that you can really understand those whom you support. And from that, we have to have a way to generate requirements based on missions and units we're supporting in a particular theater. And then we express those requirements into units of work based on sustainment organizations and the capabilities that they possess. Once you understand that, you can start thinking about concepts like fixed forward and throughput and distribution-based logistics and sustainment, so that you can start arranging your ideas on the battlefield. You have to have a deep understanding of how the sustainment functions operate. Now you can take that all that preceding information and generate our continuous sustainment estimate of what might be done, what has to be done, what could be done, as you define the space of feasible solutions. And that supports particular sustainment planning. Once you get a mission statement and a commander's intent, initial planning guidance, you're conducting simultaneous planning that gets integrated with the other warfighting functions, this back and forth of JOP and MDMP, which generates ultimately the orders and the orders products that are going to drive rehearsals and then operations, informed by a deep understanding of the threats and risks associated with that particular mission. So we see all of these components as important parts of education, that there's a certain sequence to it, and there's a increasing complexity as you move up this scale that I've arrayed, shown more in a conceptual diagram. If you stay with the Army's mission command model, continuous leadership and assessment, but going from understanding, visualizing, describing, and directing as a sequence of activities, we would like to see the most important part of our education centered on the concept of sustainment and how that is synchronized with the concept of maneuver. That all of the doctrine and education and experience and all this planning doesn't really matter unless that concept of sustainment is synchronized with the concept of maneuver. And so we realize it in the war game and through synchronization matrices and continuous integrated planning that you can achieve that. We recognize it's part art and science in there. It's getting that concept of sustainment right that is the important endpoint of planning, because from there you're going to be going forward into orders products and directives to subordinate units, be conducting sustainment rehearsals, parallel planning in the subordinate units until they cross the LD and put that into practice. So we think that the concept of sustainment is that planning product that pulls together all of the important previous work that went into planning and design. When we look at the inside of the head of a sustainment planner, then what we hope that we would see is working knowledge and the ability to understand and apply these pieces of doctrine in our FMs, and then a deep understanding of how the organizations in the sustainment warfighting function are organized and perform their missions. We hope it's informed by joint logistics education, the operational campaign kinds of planning topics that you see at the TLOG course and at the tactical support operations course, informed by the rich experience of informal practice coming out of MCTP, I should say, RCATS, CALL, Sustainment Center of Excellence, Sustainment Magazine, and so forth. We want to see that the concept of sustainment and maneuver are informed by this commander-centric planning environment that I've arrayed here, that begins with the commander's vision, his initial planning guidance, the commander's intent, and his decisions, that he's ultimately going to make. That we hope they understand this relationship between design as a problem-finding and problem-shaping process and its connection to Army MDMP and, of course, joint the JOP process, and that these commanders and staff processes are informed by continuous estimates. We don't wait for to receive a mission, but we're continuously updating that sustainment estimate. We'd like to see that sustainment estimate informed by things like IPB and sustainment intel prep of the battlefield, sustainment prep of the theater or operational environment, directives and guidance from higher adjacent supporting and supported headquarters, the estimates that are coming out of the other warfighting functions, the information that comes out of ongoing operations to update our working estimate. We'd like to see science and art somehow reflected inside that estimate, and that both wisdom and risk management are incorporated. So we see all of those things informing a sustainment estimate, and then when out of the planning process you get receipt of mission and mission analysis and MDMP and an emerging concept of maneuver, that the concept of sustainment is being developed simultaneously with that. To do that, we know that we've got to have a deep understanding of requirements and capabilities and be able to do that math that produces the shortfalls. For requirements, we've got to be effective forecasters. And capabilities, we've got to understand both the supported and supporting units. And that the shortfalls, when requirements minus capabilities equal shortfalls, that we've got to be able to come up with solutions and courses of action to accomplish the mission and minimize risk. And then once we've turned that through planning into orders products, that we now can shift over to the describe and direct portion, where we're conducting rehearsals and being participants in our supporting unit planning processes, and then managing and directing and controlling that across the LD through our STAMA system and BCS3 and through battle tracking, and then continuous execution and assessment. When we talk about those organizations, we know that we've got to have an understanding as sustainers of how everything in the theater works, both from the theater level down through corps and CFLICs, through divisions, BCTs, and other units. We've got to know who's doing the prioritizing and who is doing the planning and who is doing the preparation and management and who's doing the executing. So a deep understanding of how that's happening at every echelon seems to us to be integral to understanding our profession, so that we can ultimately come up with a concept of sustainment that we think will be synchronized with and will support that concept of maneuver. So what does a good concept of sustainment look like? What's it contain? We took a look at all of the things that we think have to happen in the development of that concept of sustainment and tried to array that in this little matrix here. We've used, shamelessly borrowed Bloom's Taxonomy, the revised one, that builds in complexity from remembering to understanding to applying to analyzing to evaluating and then creating something new. There's an increased amount of complexity as you go up that scale. And then we looked at the object we were working on as an axis that gets increasingly complex as you go from simple facts and assumptions to organized groups of facts and assumptions in the form of concepts, and then you put those concepts into motion and you have processes, and then you have integrated systems that combine multiple processes in time and space, and we have to find complex solutions. So you get complexity as you go up the scale in Bloom's taxonomy, and then increasing complexity as you go across the object of cognition, if you will. And so at the simplest level, we hope that they could remember important facts and assumptions, and we hope that they can understand how to find those facts and assumptions, to list them properly, to use references. So I'm not going to dwell much on the remembering and understanding piece, because that's what our references are for. at CGSC, we're concerned with the application of those things. And so at the simplest level, to be able to apply facts and assumptions might feature skills like how to understand the terrain and use it effectively. And that, for a sustainer, that might be being able to identify locks and their throughput rates that they can sustain, and what kind of space can support a brigade support area or a log support area. What can be used for a intermediate staging base? What are the dimensions? What kind of physical features does it have to have? Can they apply facts like turning consumption forecasts to drive requirements? And how can we apply consumption factors to validate unit requests for support? Can we use our own facts and assumptions to validate that requirement and identify when there's something that's way out of tolerance or very surprising that we need to follow up on? To move up that scale, when you start analyzing, we can now say we could take a lock and we could and unit speeds, which are facts, and then analyze that to determine if we've got realistic time and distance factors, for example, and so on. I'll let you read the rest of that chart as we go up the scale. And terminate here at creation. Can we do research to find new facts and assumptions? Going across the area complexity, when we start thinking about applying not only just individual facts, but can we apply principles of sustainment to ensure that the plans that are emerging don't violate those concepts? Can we apply sustainment techniques that are appropriate by mission phase and locations? We're looking to apply a concept. At the process level, can we take each of those classes of supply and services that we're working and make sure that the plan reflects a doctrinally sound and an internally consistent application of that concept in motion? Can we use phasing to determine that the sustainment functions are being developed appropriate to what's going on in the battlefield? And integrated systems, can we apply that in such a way that we can come up with a comprehensive plan that finds what's suitable, feasible, and acceptable for ammunition, fuel, food, personnel, retrograde, air and ground lines of communication? Can we find ways that we take those individual processes and systems and turn them into a comprehensive plan? So as we move to the right in the scale here, we have increasing complexity as you look at more complex operations and complicated operations. Well, what it turns out is that we think that we can use a scale like this, or a rubric, if you will, to not only help the students identify where their own expertise is or the boundary of their expertise, but we can start looking at the next thing to train, whether we want to educate to get more complex going up the scale in Bloom's taxonomy, or increase the complexity and size and scope of what they're focusing on by moving to the right. This chart here is a way for us to take a look at concepts of sustainment and then find areas of proficiency or needs work, and we think that the individual can use that to help estimate their own proficiencies, and then use this as a guide for what should they study next or what could they study next. If you were to break this down further into components, you might come up with something like our department's 1 to N list, in which we've tried to now start identifying those individual components of knowledge, that go into building the concepts and functions that I alluded to earlier. And this might look like a unconstrained knowledge base of things that we could define and understand and apply and appreciate and integrate, and so without any effort of being overly prescriptive. Components of planning, the outputs of planning, like support concepts and products, individual concepts that are reflected in those products, the organizations that are going to do the work, functions and tools and sustainment. All of these we think are the next level down in detail of what we've looked at earlier. We might then say, let's take a look at the observable features of sustainment education. When the student is doing something, what is it that they're doing that we can observe and that we can then put a standard to and can we estimate what the difference between satisfactory and excellence or satisfactory and needs work. And we think about this in terms of all officers. What is it that we want all officers at CGSC at the field grade level to be able to know, do, understand? And what is it that we think the force sustainment officers need to be able to do? So these are the list of what we think are the observable behaviors in the classroom that we can start putting standards to and evaluations of. We then take those ideas and then express them through the core curriculum and throughout AOC, and then look for sustainment specific lessons where we're going to be conducting planning at the strategic, operational, and tactical level for the Army. We look at joint sustainment, and this is this map right here simply is a deep look at the core. And at CGSC, in about the 300 hours or so that we have available for core instruction, there's not much dedicated pure sustainment coursework. There's a lot of stuff that's integrated into combined arms planning in the combined arms planning blocks. But we have right now, and we have 4 hours that we can focus at strategic and operational sustainment from the Army perspective. 2 hours in Charlie 409 that we look at joint sustainment. Charlie 503 is 2 hours of Army tactical sustainment inside brigades and divisions. Inside Charlie 511 and 13, we have some sustainment notes for sustainment officers planning. That's basically, we look at what are the planning considerations for the different types of Army missions and unified land operations. In 533, we take 1 hour and go over the details once more of that concept of sustainment just prior to them going into a MDMP that produces a concept of sustainment along with an operations order. In AOC, we then go into the next level of development where we're going to apply in more combined arms staff planning the basic concepts that they have learned throughout the Corps. This is the certification course for ops career field officers. And so in the 0100 block, we're doing campaign design and planning and the sustainment parts thereof. They're producing a CFLIC concept and the supporting sustainment components of that plan. In 0200, we're generating and deploying ready forces, so there's a sustainment component there. In 300 and 400, we're looking at division and brigade ops in MCOs and stability operations, and we have a 8-hour block where we look at contracting support, both at the operational campaign planning and then down inside tactical units, and how that gets managed and requirements are generated. And so there's not a lot of dedicated pure hours in the Corps and AOC dedicated for sustainment planning, but there is what there is. There's a lot of things that have to happen in those approximately 600 hours of directed coursework, and then the final third of the course year is done, of course, with electives, where we see force sustainment officers being able to drill deeper into their professional knowledge base and fill in the gaps of their knowledge base. And so that's in a nutshell how our department has approached the complex problem of designing sustainment education for both force sustainment officers and then ops career field officers, and then really the Army at large. 3 separate demographics and how we generally think about it. And I would come back to this idea of the concept of sustainment as being that central product that pulls together all of these different components that I've described into a feasible plan. That if in planning you can't come up with a concept of sustainment that is synchronized with and in support of a concept of maneuver, then all the previous work is really for naught, and you're going to be scrambling once you put that into operation. So if we can only get one thing right, our thought is that it's the concept of sustainment that really reflects that integrated, synchronized, professional practice of sustainment. So thanks for your attention. This is Ken Long from Del Ro. Good hunting.